Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome to a new series. But this is an early one for all, but also not. I read a little bit of this. I not read it. I listened to a little bit before. So this may seem like a copy. It may seem like a like okay. So Zuko got one for all early. Let's say he got this at. I'm not gonna use this up immediately. Say if he got this at 10. He not got this at 10. He got the same age as Canon, more or less, but also not. I know one thing about this one, not much, but let's see. I think Zuko is older than Bakugo for a fact. Basically, Zuko's one is basically year one. Mina is still in high school. Okay, let's say UA is high school. I'm gonna use UA and college. This is not how it is, but this is how it is. Mina's in the last year of high school. Meanwhile, Izuku's gonna be in the first year of college. That's mostly how it is. Like he's only 1 year advanced, maybe two, but I know it's at least one plus more. So let's do this. I'm gonna do at least one through four of these for this one, and thank God speech tribe works. I would do all for some, but let's say I was doing this when I was recording this, and guess what? I forgot the audio did not work. I'll do more Game Plus, don't worry. I just want to wait for more chapters. Let's see. Yeah, I updated like last week. Son of a bitch, it's not updated this week. Does that mean it's done? No, it's not. It's just they're doing more chapters. It takes a lot of time, probably. We're just gonna do this one chapter, finish it, and then I'm done. Then we're gonna be done for today. Okay, maybe not for today, but later. I might do later today though, for early this morning, cause work is soon, and I have to do other stuff for work.
On a Tuesday, and Midoriya Izuku is on his knees, crying in a Musutafu back alley. Tears stain his cheeks, and he sobs, clutching his heart with one fist as his other hand struggles to hold him steady. His bright yellow backpack, usually light as a feather, weighs him down like a hunk of lead. His school uniform, which was supposed to be a neat and pristine black, is charred and scuffed. His red shoes are worse for wear, the laces of both being completely burnt and the left one missing the entire sole. Midoriya is a little banged up, too. His ribcage throbs with the rhythm of his heartbeat, stabbing him with bolts of pain. There's a small cut on his hand, and his face looks a bit sunburned. A cool February breeze blows through the alley, chilling him to the bone. Or what if he could have felt any colder? The words of his idol, his number one role model, his hero echo through his mind, bouncing around in an infinite loop of despair as the wind blows through the city. Without a quirk, I should think not. The world of heroics is a dangerous place. Pros have to be willing to risk it all, day in and day out. Trust me when I say even top heroes get injured in the line of duty. Without a good quirk to protect themselves with, us heroes could very easily die, or worse. All Might's smile, formerly bright and joyful, becomes strained. I cannot condone someone quirkless running around fighting villains or dealing with natural disasters. It's just too dangerous. Then almost as an afterthought, if you really want to save people, be a police officer. They get a lot of flack for not being pros, but it's still an important job and a much more realistic dream. Everything just hurts. His head, his heart, his throat, his back, it's all awful. Awful, and more than just the fact that All Might, his hero for as long as he can remember, doesn't think he can do it. Midoriya had known all his life that most people thought his dream was foolish or even suicidal. From his preschool teachers to his own mother, not a person he'd met believed in his dream, or him, for that matter. Yet somehow All Might's smile was enough to keep him going, to push him through every obstacle. But now, that smile, the one bright and burning with hope, is replaced by the one he'd seen moments earlier. It's trying so desperately to be happy, but it just isn't possible. Instead, it becomes sad and mournful, wishing that things were different, but stubborn in the belief that things were always going to be the same. How long has he been in this alley? Midoriya couldn't help but wonder. The sun's hanging lazily in the sky, not quite setting just yet. It's late winter, so it'll probably be an hour or two before nightfall. His tears are slowing a bit now, and his sobs aren't quite as strong. After another bit of waiting, Midoriya does his best to wipe the tears from his eyes and stands shakily. He teeters a bit once he's up, but after a moment his knees regain their strength. He feels, well, not better, but the heartache is dulled just a tad. His insides are still swimming with grief, but he's got just enough strength to shove it all down for the moment. It feels like he might have the strength to walk home instead of just lie on the ground in some dirty alley, which is good. His mom's probably worried sick. Reminded of his mom, Midoriya reaches into his pocket and pulls out his phone. He winces as he catches his reflection and opens the camera app to get a better look. He looks like a street fighter who lost, which, based on the fact that he tried to fight back against a pair of muggers and had to be rescued, is probably a decently fair assessment. His eyes are red, too, like he just finished chopping an onion or fanning a campfire full of wet leaves. Or crying. He notices the time after a minute of studying himself. It's 4:32. He'd been crying for less time than he'd thought. Midoriya's phone vibrates, and a push notification pops into his screen. From Mom. Sweetie, I'm seeing a report of a villain attack in your walk home. Did you make it back all right? Midoriya blinks. Well, he's not home or all right, but neither one of those are going to have a big impact on his reply. To Mom, I'm almost home. I didn't even know about the attack. He gets a message telling him to hurry home and to not forget about the dirty dishes he has to wash a second later, and he turns off his phone. The villain attack should be resolved by the time he gets to wherever it is on his route back to the apartment, so Midoriya takes a big breath and starts walking out of the alley. His first step out onto the street shows him the bustling world he'd been isolated from for those life-changing or they life-changing. Does he really want to give up now? Part of him says yes, and that he's a fool for even thinking about it, but another defiant part urges him to push on moments. It's hard, so very, very hard, because everything is just the same, but also isn't in the slightest. Midoriya sort of equates the feeling with a book he read back in his first year in middle school. It was a compilation of first-hand accounts of people whose quirks came in very late. In one of them, a man unlocked his at 20, and it granted him the color perception of some random marine animal Midoriya couldn't remember. The man claimed to have cried for days, and he liked to say the moment was like being enlightened or seeing for the first time. Everything was just so clear. Midoriya didn't feel enlightened, though. Sure, he might understand the world better now, but it wasn't a good thing. He wished he could go back to being a dumb, fantasy-obsessed kid again. But he couldn't. He never could. A bike zipped right past him, accompanied by the frantic ringing of a bell. The rider's backpack brushed his nose a bit. It startled Midoriya, who jumped back half a foot. He took a couple deep breaths and gave himself some hard slaps on his cheeks. He needed to focus on getting home. Then he could sulk and contemplate his life. Grabbing the straps of his backpack, Midoriya starts to walk. He gets a couple odd looks from other pedestrians, which isn't strange. His clothes look like they belong in the trash, which they do, and he's got a first or second degree burn on his face. He's also limping slightly, but no one seems to care enough to help him out, which is par for the course with him. Midoriya noticed the distinct smell of ozone in the air around him as he rounded a corner but brushed it off. He kept walking, ducking around more corners and crossing streets absently. It's only when he's 3 meters in a crowd that he realizes that the villain attack his mom mentioned isn't over. Not by a long shot. There are barricades up, Midoriya notes. The same barricades that have separated hero and villain fights from onlookers since All Might debuted 30 years ago. There are also tons upon tons of people in the crowd. He pushes to the front of the mob. Muscle memory is a hard thing to break, but the usual excitement he feels when watching hero and villain fights is now replaced with a morbid curiosity. The scene before him is heart-wrenching, if he's being honest. There's one villain, a small, skinny man with some form of electric-type quirk, and a pro-hero with an earth quirk battling in the center of the crowd. The villain is winning soundly, despite the disadvantage he is due to his opponent's quirk. His lightning-like bolts of electricity are just too powerful for the hero's walls of earth. Come on, Quake. A booming voice shouts from Midoriya's left. The boy's head immediately spins on a dime. There, to his left, stands Death Arms, a hero who debuted 6 years ago after graduating from Ketsubetsu High. He's not particularly powerful or skilled. Midoriya really only knows him because he's a huge nerd and has memorized every hero in his town, but he's a more combat-suited hero. If things go south, hopefully he'll rush in. It's just a shame that he'd be fried by the villain. The fight continues on for a while. The hero, Quake, keeps going despite her injuries. There's a nasty gash on her thigh that Midoriya knows will scar along with bruised cheekbones, and those are just the ones he can see. Other heroes show up eventually, but they're all ill-suited for the fight too. Backdraft, for one, arrives with his sidekicks, but sticks to keeping people out of the fight and dealing with a small fire the villain must have started earlier. A snake-themed hero, Basilisk, shows up too, but he can only yell encouragement from the sidelines. Where's All Might? Midoriya mutters, barely realizing he's saying anything. He was here earlier. All Might? A man asks loudly from his left. Midoriya flinches at the volume. You said All Might was here. And just like that, the crowd starts to call out for their number one. Apparently, he'd been in Musatafu all day, so people know he should be around. But where is he? Midoriya keeps watching the fight for a while, taking mental notes on the styles and quirks of both sides like he usually does. It's not like he'll ever use them, but the familiarity helps a bit. The shouting continues for a long time, and Quake, apparently inexperienced in real fights, gets distracted by it. She looks away at just the wrong moment, and the villain hits her hard across the face with an electrified haymaker. Quake goes down. Hard. Midoriya's heart plummets for the second time that day. It doesn't seem like All Might will be here soon, if ever. Maybe it's his fault. If Midoriya hadn't been mugged, or maybe if he hadn't asked that stupid question, All Might would still be in the city. But now, because of him, All Might is probably all the way back to his agency in Tokyo, trying his best to put the sad little quirkless kid out of his mind. Midoriya can't help it. He starts to cry again. A hero might die today because of him, and no one's doing anything. Everyone's just standing there, waiting for All Might. Midoriya wants to shout and scream. He wants to smack Death Arms and all the other heroes for doing nothing. He wants to restart the day and avoid taking that stupid alley as a shortcut. Midoriya wouldn't remember when he started to move. Later, he'd ask his predecessor over afternoon tea. The man, skinny as a wisp and tired with age, would only offer just as everyone in that crowd was beginning to lose hope for a response. Midoriya might not remember when he started to move, but he would remember the moment he realized what he was doing. By this point, he's already halfway across the wrecked intersection that served as a battleground and slinging his backpack off his shoulder. The villain, who has his back turned to Midoriya in a section of the crowd, is suddenly struck by a 5-pound sack of pens, pencils, and textbooks. He spins around, momentarily forgetting about the downed hero. Midoriya, who's shaking with every fiber of his being, stands firm before the villain. Stop! He yells, his voice cracking. He feels a fat tear run from the corner of his eye all the way down to his chin. The villain stares for a moment, oblivious to the screams of terror from the crowd and gathered heroes. Then he smirks evilly and lights up his hands with yellow electricity. Big mistake, kid. He says, glee evident in his voice. It'll probably be your loss. But then All Might is there, wearing the same clothes Midoriya saw him in earlier. The blue carpenter's jeans and white tee are both filled with rippling muscle that could pulverize a whole ward. Detroit smash, All Might bellows, throwing his right fist forward in a straight punch. The villain doesn't even get a chance to react before he crumples to the ground in a pathetic heap. The crowd of people predictably goes wild, cheering for their number one. All Might helps Quake up before shouting a hurried apology for his tardiness and leaping off into the almost sunset. Midoriya is left to deal with the aftermath. It's not pretty, to say the least. The paramedics, ever dutiful, barely have enough time to patch him up before Death Arms grabs him by the arm and gives him a real tongue lashing about risking his life and trusting the pros. Backdraft does much the same, though much more gently, and Quake gives him a pat on the shoulder and a warning not to stick his neck out like that again. Midoriya quietly wonders what their words would be like if he let it slip that he was quirkless. Would they mock him? Yell at him even more? They'd probably just treat him like a 3-legged dog made of glass and walk him home to his mother. They'd probably make sure he'd never act heroic again, too. It's not like Midoriya can blame them. They're right after all. He manages to escape the bunch of heroes and the reporters that seem to constantly hover over their every move. He's lucky he's a civilian minor, otherwise he might have been forced to give a statement. Midoriya is only 3 blocks from home when he hears it. There are footsteps behind him. It's nothing new. He knows a few classmates that live in his apartment complex, but it's almost 6 o'clock. Everyone should have been home an hour ago. Young man, Midoriya hears from behind him. He stops walking and turns around. There he sees a man who's very tall and looks skeleton-like with his thin build and sharp facial features. "I'm sorry," Midoriya says, taking a step backwards, "but I really have to get home. My mom's probably worried sick because of the villain attack, I know." The man interrupts. "That's fine. I won't keep you long. I'd just like to talk." Midoriya narrows his eyes, feeling slightly apprehensive and suspicious. "I gotta." The man sighs heavily, almost like he's frustrated, then grows. He shoots up at least half a foot, and his shoulders expand to stretch out his shirt. His legs balloon up, and his once sharp and jagged face rounds out. The 2 bunny-like strands of hair that once framed his face now stick right up in the air. "And they all might?" Midoriya asks, his eyes clouded with wonder. "Wait, no! All Might is all-powerful. There's no way someone who looks like that could be him. You are an impostor." All Might frowns. "I assure you I am All Might." He lets out an awful cough and spits out a wad of blood. "Shit," he swears before a cloud of steam erupts from his body, and he's back to being skinny again. Midoriya is half tempted to offer him a tissue, but he remembers that this is an All Might impostor and probably a villain. He reaches for his phone to call anyone, before the man stops him. Wait, he moved a bit closer, though he's still a respectable 6 feet away. "Just I can prove it to you." Midoriya lowers his phone. He looks around. There's no one in the street. It's completely dead. The rational part of him wants to chuck his backpack at the man's head, but his gut is telling him that he should let the man talk. He nods. "Then prove it." The man sighs. "About 2 hours ago, I saved you from a mugging. Before I could leap off, you grabbed onto part of my jeans. I sort of pushed you off and let you ask a question." The man looks especially guilty, almost as though he regrets everything, but pushes on. "You asked if someone like you, someone quirkless, could be a hero. I told you no." Midoriya feels himself collapse on the ground. He feels his knees bruise. "It really is you." All Might nods. "Yes, I trust you know not to share this with the world." Yeah, but why tell me this anyway? I'm just a hopeless hero wannabe." All Might smiles. "Perhaps. But do you know what you did back there, with your backpack?" "I put myself in danger for no reason and almost died." Midoriya mumbles. "No, not at all. But you were there right after. If I just waited, everything would have been fine. I wasn't thinking and I embarrassed myself." "Ah, so you weren't thinking. I figured as much." Midoriya looks up, with confusion evident in his expression. All Might continues. "You see, 4 years ago, I had a big fight with a villain. He did this to me." All Might lifts up his shirt, revealing a massive, puckered scar across the left side of his torso. "I lost half of my organs because of it. There's no way that toxic chainsaw or purifier did that." All Might laughs, but it's airy and humorless. "You know your stuff. I had a feeling you were a fanboy, but you're right." He agrees those two were strong, but they didn't have the raw power to hurt me. "The fight I'm referring to has been covered up. Only the very upper brass of hero society know I've been hurt, and most don't know how bad." "How bad is it?" Midoriya asks. "Aside from missing half of my organs, I can only hold onto my hero form for 5 or 6 hours a day now." Midoriya sucks in a long breath. "That's very bad, I know." All Might looked over Midoriya again as though burning every feature into his mind. "But I'm not here for your pity or to let a random teenager in on one of the world's most important secrets. Back there, you moved to save a pro-hero whose life was about to end. You weren't thinking. I could tell just by looking at you. Believe me when I say everyone in the crowd thought you were insane because you, a skinny middle schooler with tears in his eyes, were running right into the face of danger. But I didn't share that thought because I know that every true hero in the world has had a moment like that where their body just moves. Midoriya starts to feel the sting of tears in his eyes for the second or is it third time that day. He feels his legs go weak and he collapses on the ground, supported by his forearms. The tears start to flow freely. Young man, I came here to correct myself. I have wronged you. I now believe that you, too, can become a hero. Midoriya briefly sees his life flash before his eyes. Everything from when he first met his one and only former friend to that faithful doctor's visit and all the time he tried to stand up to bullies, every word of discouragement, every time he cried himself to sleep, and every time he took a beating while being mocked. It hurt. It hurt so badly. But it was all going away and being replaced by the words he'd always longed to hear, a sob or maybe a shriek of joy tears from his sore throat. His eyes were flooded with fresh tears, which fell to the ground in a pair of small puddles. My power is yours to inherit. I what? Midoriya asks, trying to stop his sobbing. He really didn't want to cry twice in front of his hero. All Might smirks. My quirk. It can be passed on, and I'd like for you to have it. Should you accept, you'd be my successor, and I'd train you. Midoriya blinked. A transferable quirk. But how? Quirkless bodies aren't meant for quirks, and that's assuming I can receive one. He didn't even realize that he was muttering. His mind was moving too fast. But if a quirk can be passed down, can a quirk be taken? Can a quirk be modified or cloned? Where's the line when it comes to Kid? All Might interrupted, throwing his head back and smacking his face with one palm. You're really overthinking this. I'm not gonna force this on you, but I gotta know, do you want my quirk or not? Yes, Midori answered immediately. He stood up. I'll be your successor. All Might nodded firmly, no hesitation, that's what I thought. He squared his shoulders and raised a hand high in the air. Tomorrow we'll begin your training. Meet me at Dagobah Beach at 5 private message sharp. Got it? Yes, sir, Midori answered. Good, now run home. I don't want your parents to be worried. It's 5:32 on a Tuesday. Midori Izuku is walking home. His backpack and clothes are damaged beyond repair, and there are dried tears in his face, but his stride is determined and powerful. Each step is one closer to his dream. His shoulders are set firm, and his chin is up. His eyes burn with determination and grit, and the smile on his face is wide and fierce. He'll be a hero. He'll be the best hero there ever was, even if it's the last thing he'll do, too. Midoriya wasn't sure what he expected All Might to tell him when he got to the beach the next day, but it definitely wasn't start hauling trash, which, to be fair, the beach was really dirty and had been for years. If his mom was to be believed, she'd looked at him like a crazy person when he told her where he was going. It wasn't pretty. The place definitely needed to be cleaned, but he wasn't sure why it had to be him. Midoriya slips and falls face first into the sand as he remembers that, oh yeah, he was trying to pull a fridge up to the dumpster he saw by the entrance earlier. He's got rope burn on his hands now, which sucks but isn't too bad. Finally, he hears a massive, jovial voice say from behind. Midoriya rolls over and props himself up in his elbows, there, casually sitting on the fridge like he doesn't weigh 665 pounds. Midoriya has the number memorized because he's a total nerd as All Might. I was beginning to think that you were too stubborn for your own good. All, why am I hauling trash? Midoriya settles on, sitting up and crossing his legs. All Might smiles even brighter, which shouldn't be possible, and hops off the fridge. You see, back in the early days, being a hero was all about servitude. He places one hand on the top of the fridge and pushes down, crushing it. Why, I remember my years in America. They basically treated heroes like garbage men. I mean that in the best way possible, of course, but you get the idea. So I'm doing this to get used to serving the community. Midoriya asked, rubbing his hands together to warm them up. The idea makes sense. He does want to be a hero to help people, after all. All Might picks up the crushed fridge and casually tosses it into another pile of trash. Not only that, but I miss the days when the beach was clean. I made a lot of good memories here. The fridge lands with a clang about 20 yards away, and All Might strikes a pose. Also, you're not a proper vessel for my power yet, he adds, almost like an afterthought. But I thought you said I was worthy. Midoriya cries, already feeling tears running down his face. Yeesh, kid, calm down. All Might says, pulling out his phone and snapping a couple pictures. I meant physically. Mentally, spiritually, and instinctually, you're damn near perfect. It's just your weak body I'm worried about. Midoriya wipes his face with the sleeve of his tracksuit. What's wrong with my body? He knows he's skinny. He's been so all his life. But he's still decently strong for his age, mostly due to all the running he does on a regular basis. As it stands, if you were to use my power at 100%, you'd probably be blown to bits. All Might says, nonchalant like he's ordering the usual at his favorite restaurant. Blown to bits. Midoriya grabs his arms and pats himself down, making sure he still has all of his limbs. All Might nods seriously. Yes, that would definitely be bad. But there's an upside. He reaches into the back pocket of his pants and pulls out a thick, three-ring binder. You can build up enough muscle with this. He tosses the binder to Midoriya, who opens it. The first page reads Aim to Past, American Dream Plan in big, bold letters. Midoriya flips through some of the pages quickly. Wow, even my sleep is scheduled. That's what it's gonna take if you want to get into UA. All Might agrees. You do want to go to UA, right? Midoriya nods rapidly. Yes, of course. You and almost all the top heroes in Japan went there, and that's not even mentioning the free publicity from the sports festival or the top-notch education staff. There's always Shaiksu. All Might holds up one of his massive hands, stopping Midoriya. I get it, but it's going to take a lot of work if you want to pass the entrance exam. This plan is your best bet. Then, as though they're being spied on, All Might looks around the beach and carefully approaches Midoriya. If I'm being completely honest, this is going to be way hard. You sure you're up to it? He whispers, covering his mouth with one massive hand. Midoriya takes another look at the plan. The binder probably weighs 6 pounds, and it's filled with names of exercises he's never heard of. But that's not going to stop him. Midoriya nods firmly. Yeah, I'll do it. Exit 7:12 a.m. on a Saturday, and Yagi Toshinori is out for a drive in his truck. It's a newer vehicle, though it's modeled after a classic pickup from pre-Quark America. A teenage Toshinori probably would have tripped over his own feet if he saw it drive by. Adult Toshinori is lucky to get behind its wheel and drive it almost every day for a half hour to and from his agency. The radio is on, and like usual, it's tuned to a local station that plays music that was popular back when he was in his 20s. The host announces the date in between songs, saying that it's now the 17th of December. Toshinori blinks in realization. The 10 months he'd outlined for a successor had gone by in a flash, and the boy had 1 week left to get the beach clean. The thought brings a smile to his face. The boy is progressing well, and he has already demonstrated that he's not the type to settle for anything less than the best. But the last time he checked up on young Midori was last month. He remembers giving the boy a hearty slap in the back and wishing him a happy Thanksgiving. But now part of Toshinori realizes that 1, they were in Japan, and the amount of people that celebrated Thanksgiving in Japan was probably closer to 0 than it was to 10, and 2, he'd left his successor alone cleaning up a beach unsupervised for about a month. His successor, who had the habit of pushing himself too hard, even past the point of exhaustion. Toshinori can very clearly remember the time that about 5 or so months in, Midoriya had fallen victim to his own determination and face blunted while hauling an old steel toilet. It wasn't pretty, but he'd gotten the boy patched up and given him a lecture on sticking to the schedule. It should have worked on any rational adult. But Midoriya was a teenager. Toshinori remembered when he was a teenager. More specifically, he remembered how much of an idiot he was, and that he was definitely not a rational adult. The horrid image of Midoriya laid out on the beach, face down, covered in seaweed and bits of trash runs through his mind. With a sigh, Toshinori flips his turning signal on and changes lanes. Yeah, he really ought to check on his successor. Luckily, he's only about 30 minutes away from Daga Beach, so he should get there in time to catch the tail end of Midoriya's training time. Usually, the boy was done hauling trash and off the sand by 8 a.m., mostly because his middle school started at 9. But on the weekends like today, he usually stops at 8:30, then returns in the late afternoon to sneak in a couple more trips to the dumpster. By the time Toshinori gets to the beach, it's 7:45. There was a villain attack on the highway that he had to resolve, but it only took one good hit. and he was back on the road in 30 seconds flat. Stepping out of his truck, Toshinori notes that the dumpster is full again. It's not exactly a good thing, considering it was emptied on Wednesday. Midoriya was probably working too hard like he had before. Hopefully the boy wasn't passed out on the sand like he'd envisioned, or worse. Midoriya. Toshinori yells as he walks down below the seawall. Midoriya, where are you? Taking care not to slip down the steps, he makes it to the bottom. His feet rest on the soft sand. Kid, you better not. Oh, holy shit. Last month, there was probably about 20 square yards of trash to clean up, and most of it was stacked 5, 6, or even 7 feet high. Now, every inch of the beach is absolutely spotless. The sand is pure and white, and the ocean water is a pristine blue. Waves lap onto the shore, crested with beautiful sea foam. The sun is rising, and he can hear seabirds calling. It's exactly as he remembers it being back in his youth. My God. Young Midoriya. Toshinori feels himself puff up as pride and amazement fill him to the brim. He looks around again and notices a 15-foot tower of trash standing to his far left. On top of it is a screaming figure, which is probably his successor. Toshinori is proven right when he leaps to grab the boy and carries him to the ground. Look at you, Toshinori says, shaking the boy's shoulders. Toshinori almost can't believe the transformation. Smooth, hard muscle had taken the place of skin and bone. The boy's shoulders, chest, and upper arms had grown the most, swelling a near excessive amount to broaden his build. His torso tapers in a slight V shape, and Toshinori proudly notes the six-pack of abs that take up most of the space in his belly. Midoriya's legs have also beefed up, his thighs stretching the fabric of his track pants and his calves looking more like steel cable than flesh and bone. I did it. The boy laughs, nearly collapsing. Toshinori steadies him. Yes, you did. Here he hands the boy his phone after making sure he won't collapse. On screen is a picture. This is you, crying 10 months ago. I'm so skinny. Midoriya says in amazement. Yes, you certainly were. Toshinori agrees, patting the boy on the shoulder. But now, you're ready. Immediately, Midoriya straightens his back, his face serious. He looks up at his mentor. Am I really? Toshinori cocks his head in confusion, his right arm already halfway to his head to grab a hair. It's just you put in so much time and effort into helping me. Do I really deserve your power? There's tears streaming down the boy's face, but they're different than usual, less like rushing rivers and more like soft rainfall. Toshinori understands his sentiment, but flagrantly disagrees. My boy, he comforts. I was once told that there's a difference between something given and something earned. One is left to luck, and the other is left to the individual's will. You should never get the two confused. Midoriya seems to understand and wipes his tears away with the back of his hand. He takes a deep breath and looks right into Toshinori's eyes. They're still watery and red-rimmed, but they have the same fiery determination that had quickly become his favorite part about his successor. I'm ready. Good. Toshinori reaches up into one of his long, bunny-like spikes of hair and pulls a single yellow strand free. He holds it out to Midoriya. Young man, you've trained for 10 months and removed thousands of pounds of trash from this beach out of the goodness of your heart. The day that I met you, I first saw what I thought to be a delusional fool. But I was wrong. You saved that woman. You spurred me into action, inspiring me to push beyond my limits. That is why you are the one I've chosen. Midoriya Izuku, I hereby entrust my power, one for all, to you. Midoriya carefully grabs hold of the hair, which Toshinori still holds at the other end. Now eat this. What? Toshinori lets go of the hair. It sways in the wind, held firm by Midoriya. For the power transfer to work, you have to ingest my DNA. That's how it is, he explains, awkwardly rubbing his neck. Just hurry up and eat before this gets awkward. But eat, eat, eat. The next day, Midoriya shows up to the beach at 6 a.m. sharp. All Might had explained that it would take a day or so for the transfer to work, so it was best for him to rest up before they tried it out. Not that Midoriya had done much resting. He could barely sleep the previous night, and before that spent the entire day researching stockpile quirks and how to regulate the output of emitter types. But now was the moment of truth, the day of reckoning, the most important day of his Ah, young Midoriya, there you are, the voice of All Might's small form called. Midoriya always found it interesting how his mentor acted differently after changing sizes. Good morning, Midoriya replied, running down the steps to get to the beach. Am I late? Not at all. I'm just early. All Might says as Midoriya comes to a stop right in front of him. They're standing about 6 or 7 feet from the tower of trash Midoriya made the other day, which he'd probably have to help drag off the beach later. But he'd have a quirk for that, hopefully. So, do you feel any different? All Might asks, bouncing on the balls of his feet. A little. My stomach's all floaty and weightless. Aw, that's just nerves. Don't worry, it'll all be fine. All Might spins around to face the open ocean and buffs up. How about a little demonstration? First, you have to plant your feet firmly in the ground. This teacher says, I like to stagger my stance. It helps deal with the backlash better. Next, you have to stand tall. Make sure to square your shoulders and puff out your chest. Finally, pull your fist back, clench your buttocks. A what? And yell this from the depths of your heart. Smash! All Might's fist shoots forward faster than Midoriya can follow. A massive boom rips through the air, momentarily rendering him deaf. The ocean is nearly split in two, a large strip of bare sand nearly a kilometer long separating two 10-foot waves appearing to keep the two mountains of water apart. Now All Might turns around, his smile wide. Your turn. It takes a minute for the water to settle, but after it does, Midoriya stands roughly where his mentor did before. All Might himself is a couple feet back, just below the tower of trash. He's in his skinny form now and has his arms crossed. Remember to clench your butt. I know, Midoriya calls back, exasperated. Still, he mentally runs through the crash course he got earlier. He sets his stance. Is this okay? Straighten your back more, a bit more, too much. That's perfect. Midoriya takes a deep breath and shakes out his arms. He can do it. All he has to do is yell smash and clench his butt. Anyone can do that. He's got this. He cocks one arm back and takes a massive breath of air. He holds the pose for just a moment before his arm shoots forward. Smash! Nothing happens. Midoriya opens his eyes, just now realizing that they were closed. The sea is flowing like normal. There are birds gliding in the wind. What happened? Why didn't it work? Was it all for nothing? Was he going to be quirkless for the rest of his life? How stupid was he to hope? You can't just get a qui. A loud crack rips through the air, startling Midoriya. He spins around and sees All Might standing under the pile of trash, on top of which is a 100-pound fridge which sways on the edge dangerously. The fridge starts to fall and Midoriya moves. It doesn't occur to him that his mentor wasn't in any real danger. In fact, he doesn't even think. All Midoriya does is act. Using his new quirk for the first time, he leaps into the air, stirring up waves of both water and sand behind him with the sheer force of his kickoff. He intercepts the fridge midway, cocking his fist back to punch. His arm shoots forward, striking true and pulverizing the appliance. The entire tower of trash falls due to the force, and not a single speck of dust lands on his teacher. Midoriya only has a second to think, holy shit, I did it, before he feels his stomach drop. Suddenly, he's plummeting right to the ground, but All Might catches him right before he hits the sand. Midoriya can hear his master talking as they descend safely together. It's a bit hazy, though. His words sound like something about his buttocks and a brilliant smile, but then the man swears in English before leaping into the air himself. Don't worry. He says, I've got a friend who can patch you up. We'll be there soon. It's only after they fly over a familiar set of walls and land in the courtyard of the school of his dreams that Midoriya's adrenaline wears off along with the haze. He realizes very quickly that both of his legs and one of his arms are completely shattered, and oh wow, fuck, that hurts. Just hang in there, kid. Only a few more seconds. All Might mutters, breezing through the halls of UA at top speed. Eventually, he reaches the medical wing and kicks down a door. You can knock, you know. A high and airy voice comes from behind a solid wooden desk. A small woman stands up on top of her chair. Toshinori. What or why? What on God's green earth happened to that boy? All Might carefully sets Midoriya down on a nearby exam table. He tried to use one for all for the first time, and you let that happen to your successor. I didn't just let it happen. The woman, who's already gotten up from her desk, cuts All Might off with a hard smack to his left side. The man spits blood. Stop talking and let me work. All Might deflates and rapidly nods, moving out of the way. The woman carefully gets on top of a nearby stool to get a better look at Midoriya. You're a recovery girl, he recognizes, finally connecting all the dots. She's his mom's favorite hero, but Midoriya secretly thinks that she only said that to keep him from dreaming about fighting villains when he was little. That I am dearie, she says, calmly taking his mangled right arm in her hands. She looks it over for a moment before moving to study his legs. Well, as far as I can tell, all of the breaks are clean and nothing's twisted. You dislocated your shoulder, though, so that'll have to be fixed before I heal you. Toshi. All Might coughs and sputters in surprise before rushing to the bedside. Flip the boy over to his stomach so his bad arm's hanging over the side of the bed. And carefully, the youthful heroine orders. All Might quickly complies, wincing every time Midoriya lets out a groan of pain. The boy can feel all the blood in his arm rush to his broken fingers, which hurts even more. He bites his lip to muffle a curse. Now, Recovery Girl instructs firmly grab hold of his upper arm, the part that's not broken, you big oaf, you're going to pop his shoulder back and not break more bones. Like this. All Might asks, gingerly holding on to Midoriya's arm a couple inches below the shoulder, but still above where his flesh is purple and bruised. Yes, but firmly. Good now, pull the arm down until you hear a crack. Boy, this is going to hurt, but you can scream good and loud, understand. She directs the last part of her instructions to him, and he nods firmly in response. All Might draws several deep breaths and takes his time preparing himself mentally. After what feels like forever, he finally yanks Midoriya's arm down. There's a loud and chilling crack, but it doesn't hurt as bad as he thought it would. Midoriya rolls his shoulder a bit and whines. It still hurts. Recovery Girl gives him a quick kiss in the forehead half a second later, and his limbs feel as good as new. It's ridiculously cool to watch his bones maneuver back into place, and Midoriya even thinks he can feel the healing a bit. But despite his fascination with the quirk, he still feels exhausted after it's over. It makes sense, though, since Recovery Girl's quirk works with the recipient's energy. Despite him being healed, both Recovery Girl and All Might agree that he should be x-rayed to see if there's any lasting damage. Midoriya complies, but it's a bit weird and awkward, considering the last time he got an x-ray his dreams were crushed. Recovery Girl says, zooming in on different parts of the x-ray of Midoriya's left leg, I can tell that this one got the worst of it, though I don't know why. Midoriya, what happened when you used one for all? Midoriya looks over to All Might, who's sitting to his left with a contemplative look. She knows the whole truth. It's fine, he explains. Well, Midoriya takes a moment to think. There was this huge pile of trash on the beach that I stacked. Looking back, it was probably a dumb thing to do, but anyways, All Might was standing under it, and a piece started to fall. I couldn't just let it fall on him, so I clenched my butt and yelled smash, and then I was falling and now I'm here. He manages to cut himself off before he rambles too much. That doesn't explain why your left leg was worse than your right, Recovery Girl comments. He stepped with his left leg first. I remember it very clearly. All Might steps in. Recovery Girl then very calmly stands from her desk and gets up from her chair. She turns around and slowly walks towards All Might, who swallows nervously. The man only has a split second to look scared before she clocks him hard over the head with her cane. Yagi Tashinori, when I said you should listen to your heart when picking your successor, I didn't mean pick a miniature version of you. A wad of blood and spit flies out of All Might's mouth at top speed. He is not a miniature version of me. He's an overly determined fanboy with a heart of gold and an overactive mind. We're completely different. Oh, so he's a cross between you and Night Eye, even better. I don't know if you realize, but candidates are scarce. Sure, he's not perfect, but he'll get there soon. I certainly hope I'm not interrupting anything. A cheerful voice calls from the door. Midoriya looks up and over from his feet and sees an empty door frame. Oh, my apologies. I'm quite short, so I'll have to come around. The voice says again. There's the sound of a person sipping tea, followed by a soft sigh of content. Then Midoriya hears a few short footsteps. The owner of the voice steps into view, joining Midoriya and the two heroes behind Recovery Girl's desk. Greetings. I am Nedzu, principal of UA High. Am I a rat, a dog, or a bear? Who knows? Oh my god, you're Nedzu. Midoriya leaps from his seat, rushing forward to shake the principal's hand or palm. Can I have your autograph? The principal chuckles, accepting the handshake with a smile on his scarred face. Why, certainly, but only if you try to get into UA. It would be an honor to train All Might's successor. GGG, good afternoon, sir. All Might greets, carefully standing and growing to his muscle form. Your fur looks especially luxurious today. Oh, stop with the flattery, Yagi. I wasn't even your principal. Nedzu takes a sip of tea and lets go of Midoriya's hand. Though both you and Recovery Girl should be more careful with your arguments. You're all very lucky the medical wing is empty this early in the morning. If it was any later in the day, someone might have overheard. We wouldn't have to worry about arguments if this buffoon was more careful with his successor. Recovery Girl says sharply. Neji takes a quick look at the x-rays on the computer. I take it the backlash was far too great for Midoriya, is it? The boy nods. For Midoriya to handle. Those breaks look bad. Why, I don't think I've ever heard of a leg breaking in over 10 pieces. I'll work with the boy on that, sir. Rest assured by the entrance exam he'll have it under control. All Might rushes to reassure. You better. Recovery Girl warns, if he breaks his limbs like that too many times, he could lose use of them. What? Midoriya cries, rubbing his legs rapidly. There's no need to worry. Nedzusu's something that severe will take multiple breaks of similar magnitude, and Yagi is already working hard to help you. Midoriya calms down a bit and sits back down in his chair. That's only a little reassuring. Here at UA, we take student safety very seriously. You'll be supervised by our top-notch staff every time you use your quirk. There's really no worry. Neji turns from Midoriya to All Might. I take it he just received one for all today. Yes, sir. He actually first used it to save me from a piece of falling trash. My, how heroic. Nedzu looks back at Midoriya, but his gaze is different now. Less overly peppy and more intensely fascinated. I can't wait until you make it into my school, Midoriya. I'd love to help shape your mind and spirit. Free, all right, fanboy, All Might yells, striking a bodybuilder's pose with the ocean as a backdrop. Hit me with your best Detroit smash. Midoriya jumps back in shock, almost slipping on the wet sand of Dagaba Beach. But you saw what happened to me last time. If I punch you again, I'll break my arm. But here's the thing. His mentor explains, when you hit a person for the first time with this quirk, it keeps the output low so you don't accidentally splatter someone on a wall. He takes a stance similar to that of a boxer and holds out a palm, facing it flat towards Midoriya. Now, come on, hit me. Midoriya looks down at his hands. He tries to remember how it felt when he used one for all last time, but everything's blank other than the vague comparison of an egg in a microwave. He'll have to settle for All Might's instructions again if he wants to do it. All right, if you say it's safe. His mentor nods eagerly, though waits patiently while he runs through the checklist. I just need to punch this time, so maybe if I focus on my arm, my legs will be fine. Midoriya mutters, backing up so he has room to get a running start. Once he's about 10 or so feet away, he pulls his right arm back and sprints as hard as he can. He feels one for all course through him, noticing the sheer raw power it contains for the first time, concentrated entirely in his right arm. He nearly backs out, scared that it will blow his limb to bits, but at the last second, right when his fist is about to strike All Might's palm, the power level sharply dips. Smash! A light gust of wind rushes through Midoriya's hair and open jacket. His fist is held tightly by All Might's hand. There's no pain. He doesn't even realize that he closed his eyes until he starts to open them. Midoriya pulls his arm back, looking at it in wonder. I did it, he whispers. That you did, my boy, that you did. All Might inspects his palm. That wasn't too much power, but considering you can only handle the bare minimum, it'll do for the time being. So what's my training going to look like now? Midoriya asks, eagerly shifting from foot to foot. His mood has already drastically improved. Will we get to spar? All Might laughs. No, no, we won't do combat training just yet. You need to get better at controlling and getting a feel for your limit first. He strolls over to the fallen pile of trash and picks out the back half of an old sedan. Practice in this every day that I'm not here before and after you do your regular trash cleaning, taking care to regulate the power. Once all of the junk is gone, I'll get you into a real gym. What about the rest of today and when you are here? You'll practice on me, of course. Now, take another hit so you get a better feel for your level. All Might holds out one of his hands again. You may have completed the first step, but you've got a long road ahead of you. Midoriya nods, determined. I promise I'll keep working hard. That's what I like to hear. Now hit me. Detroit smash. A week goes by with Midoriya's spirit the highest it's been in years. Something about having a quirk itching under his skin, ready to activate, makes him feel as light as a feather. People at school were as usual, but now that the year is wrapping up, they've all just seemed to forget about the quiet, quirkless third year. Midoriya went home every night that week and practiced turning one for all on off in his room for hours. It was hard at first, but he does it so often that it now only takes a couple seconds to flip on a limb. Regulating the power is another story, however. All Might had once mentioned offhandedly that, in his prime, he could generate enough force to affect the weather patterns in an area 4 times the size of Manhattan. And on top of that, All Might's 100% was probably somewhere around his 70 or 80% if his mentor was to be believed. He still practices, though at first it takes intense concentration, and Midoriya very nearly levels his apartment complex on accident. His limit is around 5% by his estimate, so he mostly focuses on keeping it at or below that level. By Saturday, he's got a good enough handle on it to make sure he won't accidentally hurt himself, though the output tends to fluctuate from anywhere between 2 and 5%. His training on the beach continues, with All Might showing up on Monday and Thursday. He supervises Midoriya as he hauls bigger and bigger pieces of trash away and coaches him on how to properly throw a punch. It's Saturday now, though, and Midoriya is happily sitting on the last piece of trash left on the beach. It's an old engine block, rusted over and brown. It's probably staining his pants, but he doesn't care. The next step is coming. Midoriya closes his eyes, taking in the rays of the setting sun and the crisp sea breeze with a bright smile. School the previous day was really easy, and he got to take notes on a hero fight on the walk home. What's more was the fact that it was Gang Orca he got to see. The man had stopped a bank robbery with amazing efficiency, and Midoriya got to see the rare event that was a water-based hero fighting on land. A soft patter of footsteps in the sand behind him interrupts his thoughts. Midoriya looks over his shoulder. Oh, hi, All Might. He greets, waving even though his mentor is only 2 feet away. Good evening, young Midoriya. I take it that's the last piece. All Might's bundled up in a long, cream trench coat with a violet scarf around his neck. Yeah, I got everything but this one in the dumpster a couple minutes ago. Midoriya stands, brushing rust off his pants. All Might looks thoughtfully out to sea for a moment. He closes his eyes and sighs. We're sparing today. Just get that engine block in the back of my truck and we can start. Midoriya quickly complies, leaping over the seawall with 5% one for all channeled into his legs. He kind of botches the leap back, but he can't bring himself to care. He's going to learn how to fight from All Might. Right, since this is your first real practice match, we'll go easy. All Might grows to his hero form. Don't be intimidated by my stature or my reputation. Right now, I'm your teacher. It's hard not to be, but Midoriya nods anyway. So do we just start? Real fights don't have starting guns, All Might says. So as that end, All Might cuts him off with a quick swipe to his head, which Midoriya barely ducks. Keep on your toes, you zygote. They spar until sundown, and Midoriya gets more than a couple bruises, but he couldn't be happier. Tashinori looks up at the moon. It shines brightly, lighting up the sea and casting long, narrow shadows on the world. It's full tonight, he notes. Something about the moon has always made him more thoughtful. Or maybe it was the stars surrounding it, though this close to the city there were no stars. The man taps his thigh gently with his hand, which is bathed in moonlight. He is to be honest with himself now, or he'll never be a good teacher. Young Midoriya's progress is too slow. The boy learns quickly and practices diligently. He hangs off every word Toshinori says, almost taking it like gospel. He even smiles when he fights bright and fierce. But he's far too stiff. Every attack is telegraphed seconds in advance, and the time in between moves is way great. He's missing something, but Toshinori can't figure out what for the life of him. That's why Toshinori is holding his phone in his hands as he sits in his truck after another night of training. He's shaking, too, which does little to help his state. There's 5.5 weeks before the UA entrance exam, and he knows his successor doesn't have the technical skills to get enough robot kills to get in. Shikes was also an option, but they're very cutthroat, and Midoriya wouldn't be at his best there. Of course, there's a solution to the problem. Toshinori knows this well. It's actually pretty simple if he's honest, which he always tries to be. But at the same time, it's also so difficult. With a deep breath, Toshinori selects a contact and hits the call button. While it rings, he thinks, will he be sent to the hello, is this Sorhiko? There's a pause. Who is this? It's All Might. Who All Might? Toshinori. Yes, it's me. Why are you calling me Toshinori? The voice is still soft and confused, and he can practically see the innocent old man facade his teacher is wearing. I found my successor, and I need your help. The line goes very quiet for a while. Then why didn't you lead with that, you big oaf? And what do you need my help for? I'm an old man. Toshinori winces. I'm not a good teacher. You can say that again. And so I need you to give the boy some pointers. Just 2 days. What Toshinori doesn't say is that spending more than 48 hours in the same city as Gran Torino would be hell. Fine, but the bread better be worth it. Exits the second week of January, and Midoriya is very confused. Wait, so you don't want to be my teacher anymore? No, that's not what I mean. I just like for you to see someone else briefly. Learning from just one person isn't good. And it's not like I'm throwing you to the street. The man's my former teacher. He wavers a bit at the end and his legs start to shake, which confuses Midori even more and even adds a tinge. Just how scary is this guy? He half mutters. All Might looks at him with a serious expression. There's fear. Midori. That's so weird. Here's the address. It's an old building I rented out to be your gym. We'll use it after Gran Torino's done with you. He hands Midori a small slip of paper. Do I just show up tomorrow after school? Yes, Andy, good luck, kid. The building Gran Torino is waiting in is an old one. It was about 3 stories tall and made of red and black brick. The roof was flat and had what looked like an old jungle gym made of pipes on top. The windows were boarded up, and the fire escape on the side was rusted. A crude wooden sign that read Gym Midoriya was hung over the heavy metal door. Carefully turning the handle and pushing in, Midoriya entered. The lights were off, and he clumsily waved his hand over the wall. Eventually, he found a switch, and the lights flicked on. Taking a look around, Midoriya noticed that the room was filled with workout equipment and boxes. The building was probably one of those restaurant/apartment hybrids before it was sold, because there was also a counter in the far end and a staircase leading up. Midoriya calls, carefully taking off his backpack and setting. There's a small sign sitting on ups. He reads out loud, Toshi says you're great, but we'll see about that. GT. He quickly grabs. It's narrow. Once he gets to the top, he fumbles for another light switch and nearly. Oh my God, he's dead. There's the bottom. Midoriya drops his backpack. Oh God, what do I do? I should call. I'm not dead. The old man exclaims, pushing up. I just took a fall while carrying some sausages. Midoriya looks around the room. It's probably 20 feet tall and all cold, gray stone with lots of protruding slabs of concrete. There's some pillars that go from floor to ceiling and table-like rectangles of varying height. Why would Gran Torino be making sausages in here? Say, kid, who are you? Gran Torino walks over. I'm Midoriya, he says. The man is very clearly senile, which kind of makes sense. He taught All Might, so Midoriya knew he'd be old from the get-go. But this is almost too grand. I said my name is Midoriya. The boy sighs. Then the old man bends over and starts digging through. But then, almost at the flick of a switch, Grand him, you've got good workout clothes and wrist weights. You came prepared for this. He's suddenly gruff and serious, inspecting Midoriya's green track pants and gray sweatshirt with a critical eye. Can you stop? It's not like you can just look through. Sure I can. Now why don't you fire off a one-for-all smash at me? Gran Torino says after throwing the set of gym clothes Midoriya brought onto a nearby hunk of concrete. I what? Right now. But I'm not even warmed up. PFFT warmed up. I'll get you warmed up after you show me how you fight. Gran Torino gets it. Midoriya bows his head in acceptance. All right, he says, tapping into one for all and cocking his left arm back. He rushes forward and swings his arm at 5%, aiming down so he hits Gran Torino across the face. But he only hits solid air. Oh, that's pathetic. You're so stiff and awkward. Toshinori wasn't kidding. Gran Torino berates, casually resting on a lumpy section of the wall. Get your butt changed. I can already tell that I've got a lot to teach. We're gonna be here a while. Midoriya changes at top speed and quickly re-enters the training room. He doesn't even get the chance to ask a question before Gran Torino slams into his back, drilling him to the floor. Keep on your toes, kid. Did Toshinori teach you nothing? The older man pushes back off, and Midoriya stands. Gran Torino very clearly relies on speed in his fighting style, and Midoriya can tell by his movements that the room is perfect for him. Narrowly ducking an attack, Midoriya leaps to put his back to a pillar. If Gran Torino attacks chaotically, then limiting his options should help. Hey, you're not dumb. That's good. Gran Torino slams a fist into Midoriya's ribs, who didn't even see him coming, but not good enough. Midoriya quickly recovers, pushing up in time to take a kick to the thigh. Gran Torino continues to bounce around the room, diving in for a hit every now and then. As time goes by, it becomes clearer and clearer that there's a pattern. Left, right, left, right, above, behind, behind. Midoriya mutters, biding his time. Finally, after a couple more minutes of being hit, the moment shows itself. Gran Torino pushes off the ceiling and Midoriya throws himself to the ground, rolling to his back. At the last second, he pushes up with one hand and throws a punch directly at Gran Torino's head. The man simply tilts to one side before giving his student an uppercut. Good eye, but you can't always sit and wait for the right moment. Gran Torino lands on the ground in front of Midoriya. Real fights don't always have perfect moments, and natural disasters never do. Biding a time like you did is a good skill, but overuse will get you killed. I understand, Midoriya says, kicking at the floor in disappointment. Wipe that look off your face. You did good for a newbie. Better than All Might anyways. At least you didn't puke your guts out. All Might did what? I'll tell you later. For now, I'm gonna eat some dinner. You're welcome to join me, or you can practice on those pipes on the roof. Just be careful, I don't want to scrape you off the pavement. Midoriya chooses to go up to the roof for more practice. It's a no-brainer, really. He needs more practice. All the other kids taking the entrance exam have had at least 11 years to get used to their quirks, but he's only had one for all since December. The exam's in 5 weeks, so he needs every bit of practice. The roof of the building is wide and shrouded by a 4-foot-tall stone wall. The bulk of the floor space is taken up by the 10-foot jungle gym in the middle, but there's also a punching bag in one corner and another corner styled like a boxing ring. The jungle gym on the roof looks old, but a quick shake shows that the welds and metal are both strong. The design is old and would probably give his mother a heart attack. The shapes the pipes make are all inconsistent and off-kilter, crisscrossing every which way. It's clearly made for someone his size, too, which is odd. Maybe it's so he can work on his flexibility. Grabbing onto a pipe, Midoriya climbs up the jungle gym. He feels himself slipping and quickly activates his quirk. He overshoots the next pipe and has to use his left leg to kick back up. It continues like that for a while, with him maneuvering all over the pipes, sometimes going scarily fast. At one point, he even swings a full circle around a particularly high pipe before landing on the ground. That was pretty good, but your admiration for All Might is like shackles. It'll only slow you down. Midoriya looks up to see Gran Torino, who's standing with a plate of steaming pastries. Midoriya says, unsure of how to respond. His admiration for All Might was what made it possible for him to keep going, and now that was a bad thing. Don't think too hard about it. Come on, let's get some more practice in before you gotta go home. The sparring after that goes a little better. Midoriya tries to mimic Gran Torino for a bit, but he quickly realizes that the focus needed to channel one for all first to his legs, then to his arms, then back again is way too difficult for him to achieve. In fact, the focus needed to repeatedly turn the quirk on and off is way too much for him. Towards the end of the practice session, Midoriya just settles on keeping the power in his arms at 5%. It goes well until he loses concentration and accidentally hits with what feels like 7 or 8%. It's not too bad, but Gran Torino still sends him home a whole half hour early because you messed up once like that, and it'll just get worse the more you practice. Come back first thing tomorrow morning. That night after dinner, Midoriya takes a shower. His mom raised a fuss about the bruises and cuts that Gran Torino gave him, but he brushed her off. He needed to think. The water was hot and steamy, fogging up the mirror and making the tile floor slightly wet. Slipping in, Midoriya lets the water hit his head before it trails down his body. His hair is a pain to wash, so he only bothers every other day. He washes his face next and his body. Once he's done, he rinses off the soap that was all over his body. All over his body. Why was that thought sticking with him? He showered like this forever. Heck, everyone has. It's the most efficient way of cleaning yourself. What else were you supposed to do? Wash one arm at a time. Wait, Midoriya quickly gets out of the shower and dries off. Ignoring the fact that there's still some soap on his face, he activates one for all, but this time it's different. Instead of just one or both arms, or even his legs, Midoriya lets a steady level of 5% flow through his body. It's tough, but not uncomfortable. He can move like this. I've got it. Midoriya jumps and promptly hits his head on the ceiling of the bathroom. He landed on the floor with a thump and scampered back up. Honey, are you all right? His mom yells from the kitchen. Yeah, I'm all right. Just slipped and fell. Midoriya replies, hurriedly putting on his pajamas. Are you sure? His mom calls again. She sounds worried, and there's footsteps coming down the hall. Yeah, I'm sure. It's nothing bad. Midoriya opens the bathroom door to see his mom standing right outside. The floor was wet as so. Sweetie, his mom says gently. Her eyes are already watering. Last year, when you said you wanted to bulk up, I was happy. Those meals aren't cheap, but that was okay. You were doing so much better. She sniffs and wipes away a tear. But now you're gone from 5 in the morning until 10 at night. It's just, I'm worried. And today you even came home with bruises. Oh, Mom, Midoriya says because what else can he? He hasn't told her anything about what he's doing or why. He's done nothing but give her the bare minimum and expected everything back. Please, Izuku, baby, just tell me what's going on. I don't know if I can take much more of this. Midoriya tries to say, but he falters. It's nothing bad, I promise. He tries again, looking at the floor. It's just hard to share. But I'll try. Just let me think for a moment. His mom nods slightly before walking off to the living room, and Midoriya slowly sits down in the ground. He rests his head in his hands. Why is this so hard? Having a quirk is a great thing and all he's ever wanted. Telling his mom should be easy, but it's not. Every time he thinks about it, he sees that face. Oh, Izuku, I'm so sorry. The memory runs on repeat through his mind. It hurts every time, stabbing him through the heart. He tries to mouth the words and practice what he'll say, but all he can see are those tear-filled eyes. But he has to do this. Pushing off the floor, Midoriya slinks into his room and grabs a grip trainer. It's the heaviest one he's got, so he can barely close it on a good day. Walking out to the living room, he envisions that awful memory merging with the grip trainer. Mom, he says, standing just inside the living room. His mom looks up from her tissue. I have a quirk. Midoriya channels a small stream of one for all into his hand and squeezes the grip trainer as hard as he can. It snaps in two before falling to the floor. The memory goes with it. The both of them cry hard late into the night, forgiving and apologizing over and over again. Ford Tashinori smiles as he locks the door of his pickup. A swift breeze blows through his hair as he walks up the steps to Jim Midoriya. Gran Torino's 2 days were up, and now Tashinori would see how well they worked. Knowing Gran, young Midoriya was probably beat until he figured something out, which, while a bit inhumane, was probably necessary. He only accepted the best of the best after all. Pulling out his key and reaching for the doorknob, Tashinori realizes that the front door is ajar. He furrows his eyebrows. Midoriya isn't due at the gym for another 10 minutes. Looking over his shoulder and stepping inside, Tashinori grows to his hero form and closes the door behind him. Better to be safe than sorry. The first floor looks intact, though there are some weights in the wrong places. Midoriya probably worked out some since he saw him last. Tashinori would have to teach the boy to keep the weight area tidy. The door to the basement, which is really just a 7 by 7 by 7 hole in the ground, is open, which is even more worrying. Nothing's in there yet, and the door had been locked tight. Tashinori had plans for an office or file room down there to keep track of the boy's progress, which may never come into fruition if there's an intruder problem. Typical hero protocol stated that in a situation like this, the person searching the house should go from floor to floor, bottom to top, so Tashinori makes for the basement. The steps are very creaky and barely able to support his weight, but Tashinori still makes it down and stops. What on earth? The basement had been turned into a makeshift bedroom with a space heater, a soft Persian rug, and a twin-size bed that was drowning in blankets. There's even a small dresser and a fridge, though both were empty. The walls are partially painted a dark gray from the ground to about 4 feet up, like some kind of hobbit wanted to remodel. Was somebody squatting in Jim Midoriya? Or was the boy himself living here now? But both were equally worrying. A loud thump 2 floors up shakes Tashinori from his thoughts. Someone is definitely here. He races up the 2 floors of stairs and runs right into the cement floor. There, Tashinori sees a pair of blurs, one yellow and one green, chasing each other midair. One seems to take notice of him and makes a turn right in his direction. In a split second, All Might, the world's symbol of peace, is flat on his back, coughing blood. "You're late," a gruff voice reprimands. The boy and I were just getting warmed up. "Gran," Tashinori wheezes, slimming down and sitting up. You're still here," he shoots to his feet, hurriedly brushing off any dust from his shirt. Gran Torino scoffs. "You say that like it's a bad thing, you overgrown zygote." He turns around and cups his hands around his mouth. "Kid, stop for a moment and say hi to your idiot teacher." The green blur, which hadn't stopped bouncing around the room, stopped. It landed on the floor in a sloppy roll and straightened out. There, dressed in a worn-out Bronze Age All Might hoodie and a pair of sweats, was young Midoriya. "Hi, All Might," the boy waves cheerfully. "Now get back to work." That roll was awful. Gran Torino orders, turning around and ignoring a bright "yes, sir." Tashinori took a moment to pick his jaw off of the floor. He learned all of that in 2 days. Yep, he's not perfect yet, but between you, me, and whatever UA has up their sleeve, the boy's gonna be a real monster one day. Gran Torino sneaks a glance over his shoulder. He almost looks impressed, which is horrifying. "Wait." Tashinori swallows. "Between you and me," he quotes, fearing the answer. "Hey, I figured why not." Tashinori feels his heart palpitate at his teacher's words. "I've got nothing better to do, and the boy is kind of great. Just don't tell him I said that. But what about your hero duties? This city is really dull, and you'll be leaving your old post a man down. PSSH, that part of the country is as sleepy as a nursing home, just like this one. Not to mention there's plenty of pros," Gran Torino argues. "Besides, bullet trains exist if I need to get somewhere, and I get a senior discount." Tashinori, unfortunately, can't find a fault in the man's logic and wearily looks up to his successor for a distraction. The boy does a twirl midair, followed by a somersault, and lands with a roll. Then he pushes up and leaps to the ceiling. He bounces off of it and ricochets off a set of pillars. "Oi, quit showboating." Gran Torino yells, "I told you to build good habits for real fights, not practice showing off for girls." "Sorry, Gran." Midoriya apologies, slowing down. Tashinori idly wonders how fine his control over the power is. "It's so fun. I've never moved this fast before." He does a barrel roll and nearly face plants into a wall. Whoops, Gran Torino sighs heavily. I suppose I can't fault him. I was the same way when I could use my quirk freely. Luckily, I grew out of it. Yes, sometimes I forget he's only 15. Toshinori agrees. He works so hard and is very mature, at least when it comes to thinking like a pro. Come to think of it, has he shown you his notebooks yet? No, he hasn't. What are they full of autographs? Yes and no, Toshinori says, looking away from Midoriya. I think they started as a way for him to show his adoration for heroes. You know how kids are these days? Hey, All Might, Gran, can I get some help? Midoriya asks from afar. He's ignored. Boy, do I ever. I'm old as dirt, and I still get ankle biters bugging me while I'm on patrol just 'cause I've got a cape. Wasn't like that back in the day, not at all. Of All Might. Midoriya asks again, sounding much more worried. Yet, All Might help. Toshinori and Gran Tor. They still nothing. I'm up here, Midoriya says weakly. Toshinori looks up. There, in the middle of the room. What on earth? Toshinori, beside, I can't. Midoriya shoots off to the left before stopping suddenly. Control, he shoots up and then down, stopping with the soles of his shoes a half-inch from. Then Midoriya's eyes roll back, becoming milky white, and he collapses to the floor, unconscious. He scratches his head and opens his eyes, but he's assaulted by a blinding, multicolored beam of light. He quickly covers his face with one hand and sits up. He opens his eyes again as slowly this time. It takes a while, but eventually he's able to see through all the colors. The first thing he notices is that he's on a beach. The white sand is a comforting, familiar ground to lay on. The second thing he notices is the sky. It's different. There are still stars, but they're faint and tiny. There's no moon, and the vast majority of wherever he is dominated by 8 spheres. The one furthest to the right is the smallest. It glows a soft white like the North Star. The second is almost twice as big as the first, shining a beautiful cobalt blue. It's relatively close to the first, and the two seem to bleed into each other. The third is a lush ruby red. It's far from the second and bigger, too. The fourth is close to the third, glowing a harsh acid green. It's the same size as the third. The fifth is a warm orange and close to the fourth. It's bigger, too, but not by much. The sixth is a soft lavender. It's bigger than the fifth, but shines nearly as bright. The seventh is purple, too, though a rich, royal-looking one. It's comforting and shines the second brightest. The eighth is by far the biggest. It's a bright gold and dwarfs the others by a mile. Still, it's not brash like the fourth. It feels hopeful. Ah, I see you've made it here. Congrats. It took me years. You must be special. Midoriya scampers away, startled by the voice in his ear. W what? The voice laughs. I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe here, can't you feel it? I can. Midoriya agrees. W, where are you? I'm here, the voice says from behind. Midoriya whirls around to see a woman. Not what you were expecting. She cocks her head. No, no, no. Midoriya defends, it's just, who are you? The woman looks like a pro hero. She's tall and muscular with a white cape, yellow pants and boots, a black bodysuit, and a red sash that's tied around her waist. Her hair is put up in a messy ponytail, and her eyes are a bright, intelligent gray. There's a beauty mark on the left side of her chin, and her smile is soft and fond. Meet, I'm the seventh. She says, it's nice to meet you, ninth. You can call me Nana. Seventh, ninth, wait, does this have to do with One for All? Midoriya scratches his head. What even is this? A hallucination? A fever dream? Yes, ask Toshinori about it later, but right now I have a job to do. Nana says. Then she shoots into the air and over to Midoriya. My float is a great quirk. When I was still alive, I used it to save many people. As she spoke, the beach started to glow a bright white and everything began to fade. Wait, you're going too fast, Midoriya says, trying to grab hold of Nana. He barely gets half a finger on her cape. There's no time, kid. You're waking up. Nana hushes. Anyways, it's a lot stronger than it used to be. You can thank Toshinori for that. When I was in my prime, I could only suspend myself and move slowly in one direction. Now you could probably use it to fly. Fly, what are you talking about? Midoriya shouts. Everything's starting to get really hazy, and he's losing his balance. Fly, kid. I mean really fly. Like a bird, but better, Nana says a bit impatiently. Anyways, wear a helmet when you practice and find out what triggers it for you. By ninth. And good luck. Everything fades to black and he wakes. The first thing Midoriya feels is a large, calloused hand repeatedly smacking him in the face. Kid, a voice shouts, Midoriya, wake up. You can't just slap the boy, you justice-obsessed oaf. He could have a concussion. Another, slightly angry-sounding voice says. Midoriya cracks open one green eye and tries to sit up. He falls back down with a huff. What happened? He asks. You tell us, kid. Gran Torino says you've been out for 10 minutes. Yes, All Might agrees. I'd like to know why you were floating like my master. He lets out a soft curse as Gran Torino smacks him with his cane and tells him to be more patient. Your master, Midori asks, rubbing his eyes and propping himself up on his elbows. Wait, I had a vision. A vision. All Might questions, shifting away and cocking his head to one side. He looks thoughtful. Yeah, there was this beach and 8 sons and a woman. Midoriya lists, I think her name was Nana, and she told me to wear a helmet and something about triggers. And kid is slowed down. Gran Torino stops him, looking about 10 years older than he did just a second earlier. Start from the beginning and go slow. Midoriya nods and stands up before recounting what he saw in the vision. Some things are a bit fuzzy, but he can remember perfectly how the stars felt and looked along with the woman. Her words aren't as clear, but a few stick. Nana, float, 7th, helmet. And that's all you remember. All Might asks, leaning against a hunk of concrete. He looks like he desperately wants to push for more, but doesn't. Yeah, I think so. Midoriya says, fiddling with the strings of his hoodie. Do you know what this means, All Might? His mentor regards him for a long moment, looking thoughtful. About the visions. No, my master only mentioned them once offhandedly and didn't go into detail. All Might looks Midoriya deep in the eye. But I have had one. The day I got this. He taps his left side and flinches. Who is she? Midoriya asks. The woman, I mean. Shimura Nana. Gran Torino answers. The 7th wielder of One for All. 7th. Midoriya mutters. Is this normal? No, everything about this getting more quirks, visions, is actually quite spooky. All Might answers hollowly, but considering the origins of One for All, it's not exactly a surprise. Gran Torino finishes. What are you guys talking about? Origins. What even is One for All? Midoriya rapid fires. All Might and Gran Torino exchange glances. They nod. It's better if we sit down for this. Let's go downstairs, the older one says. It takes some time for his mentor to gather his thoughts, but the contemplative expression disappears from his face. Young Midoriya, you know that One for All can be passed down. Midoriya nods. And you know that you're the 9th. Another nod. All Might takes a deep breath. It all starts with 2 brothers at the dawn of an era. You see, after the luminescent baby, people everywhere started to get powers of all kinds. At first, nothing really changed. There just weren't enough people with quirks around to shake things up. But after the years went by, more and more children were born with abilities. 20 years after that first quirk baby was when things really started to change. There were riots, protests, battles in the streets, massacres. Those without quirks started to fear and were consumed by it. Had it not been for quirks, humanity would be vacationing among the stars. Midoriya quotes. I read that in a textbook once. Gran Torino grunts. The war started pretty quickly after they passed quirk laws. Those with abilities either saw themselves as betters being oppressed or as cursed. They fought back or endured the hate. But one man rose to unify the quirk. All for one, All Might says softly. He covers his left side with one palm. He started and led several revolutionary groups, gaining many followers with his ability, which he shared a name with. With his power, he could give and take quirks. Midoriya feels his lips move, mouthing a swear his mother would have fainted at. Yes, All Might agrees it's very concerning, but this man, All for One, had a frail younger brother. He was quirkless, but had a strong sense of justice. He tried to stop his older brother, but was defeated. Whether it was out of pity or a move to force his brother to submit, All for One forced a quirk onto his sibling. Gran Torino continues. It was a stockpiler that allowed the user to build up mass amounts of power and use it to make their body stronger. But the younger brother, as it turned out, wasn't so quirkless. Midoriya's head snaps to look at All Might. Yes, the younger brother had the ability to pass down quirks. It's rather useless on its own, but once it merged with the stockpiler, it made something new. Midoriya breathes one for all. And that's the origin of this power of ours. All Might finishes, something born of evil, but changed by the heart of a hero to destroy its creator. The three of them sit in silence for a moment. The air is thick with emotion, worry, and fear being most prevalent in Midoriya. This All for One, is he still around? What happened to the other holders? Are we safe? The boy asks. All the previous users were killed by All for One except Toshinori. Gran Torino speaks, gazing at his cane thoughtfully. The bastard's gone now, thanks to ye old symbol of peace. All Might smiles sadly. I beat him, but at a cost. He's the one that forced me to take this form. Midoriya tries to imagine what that fight must have been like. Faster than I can see, he decides. Fast, but at the same time drawn out and brutal, something that should be in a history book or made into a movie. Just imagining what someone could do with hundreds of years of quirks gives him shivers. So what now? Midoriya asks. What's the point of this power if its objective is complete? I may have finished off All for One like the power was meant to. All Might says, but the world's not safe. I'm weak now, and I'll probably have to retire in the next 5 years or so. But the world will still need a symbol. This power, it's not meant to eliminate anymore, but instead, it's meant to make the world safe and keep it happy. You're the next me. I trust that you'll fill my shoes well, Midoriya Izuku. They sit like that for a while, Midoriya in amazement, All Might in contemplation, and Gran Torino in memory. But then Midoriya realizes something. So I probably have 8 quirks. Not 8. Gran Torino corrects. Toshinori was quirkless, so 7 at most, if you count one for all. We don't know much about any of the users but Nana, but we'll work on that. Then after a pause, if you ask me, the first couple probably didn't have quirks. Midoriya must look absolutely distraught because All Might rushes to comfort. It's not that big of a deal. I never showed any signs of the quirks of the previous users. You might only get float, or maybe this was a one-time thing. It'll be fine. The physical enhancement aspect will be plenty for you to take my place as the symbol of peace. It's just kind of a lot to handle since I've never had a quirk before, but I'm sure I'll manage with you too. But what will people say if I suddenly show off more than one quirk? Will they think I'm with All for One? No, he's dead, but what about his followers? It's just so stressful. Midoriya All Might gives him a firm chop to the shoulder. Quit word vomiting. It's fine. We have plenty of time to figure this out, and if we don't, UA will probably help. What's important is that we keep training and figure out how float works for you. He turns to Gran Torino. You'd know more about that than me. The old man rolls his eyes. You think just cause Nana and I were good friends, we knew everything about each other's quirks. The silence that followed was telling. Gran Torino huffs. I know a little, but this is something he'll have to work on mostly alone. They train for weeks after that. It's hard, back-breaking work for Midoriya, but every second feels amazing. Even when Gran Torino suddenly amps up the speed of his attacks, or All Might blindsides him with a backhand, his smile never wavers. Every day gets better, and that itself is a reward. What does throw him for a loop, though, is when Gran Torino throws him into a mildly dubious fighting area in some shady section of Tokyo. Apparently, if Midoriya only fought Gran Torino and All Might until he got into UA, he'd end up with bad habits, and apparently his older mentor wasn't against the morally gray. He gets his butt kicked, obviously, but he learns a lot about different fighting styles from the 2 occasions he got talked into going. All fighting was done quirkless and with gloves, which is nice because according to Gran, some places throw 2 people in a cage and wait until one comes out. Midoriya keeps weightlifting, too, focusing on building up as much muscle mass as possible. All Might shows him no mercy on that front, constantly coming up with more and more difficult exercises. Such exercises include, but are not limited to, hanging upside down from a bar, bent at a 90-degree angle at the waist, one-handed push-ups while training his grip strength, and walking around the building with all might in his back. That last one is the worst by far, and Gran Torino gets a lot of pictures of Midoriya being crushed under All Might. Float never makes another appearance. It bums Midoriya out at first because he can tell that both of his teachers want him to use it, but it just never heeds his call. No matter how long he bounces around with full cowl, All Might change the name from Grand Bounce because apparently he sucks at naming things along with analogies, or meditates with one for all active, or envisions himself soaring through the air. He just can't float. All Might and Gran Torino comb through thousands of records for all of the previous holders of One for All and even make a notebook for him. They promptly hide it and only let him look over the information and float because they don't know if he'll show any other quirk. But soon, almost in the blink of an eye, February 26th arrives, and with it, the UA entrance exam. X bonus, Midoriya's quirk files. Subject, Gran Torino. Quirk Jet Desk allows the user to shoot out jets of air from the soles of the feet. The jet comes from the air the user breathes. Strengths, amazing linear acceleration, speed, turning, and adaptability. Excellent for close quarters combat and hitting hard fast. Works best with hit and run tactics and against disorganized opponents. Weaknesses, limited flight duration. Making curves. Where on the body the user is just a normal man, albeit tough and experienced, but still feels the force of impact on a target. Counter strategies, a strong hardening quirk or a robust shield and a net would be great for stopping Jet. However, the person taking the force would have to remain upright. If they can do so, then all they have to do is push the Jet user into a net or capture device. After that, the best way to secure would be to cover the holes on the feet. Shock absorbing or shock redirecting quirks would also be ideal, ranking on its own B, combined with the user's skill S+.
Mm. Okay, hopefully this is still more funny, because if it's not, it's gonna be bad for me. It is, okay. We're not getting for an 8 right now, but I do want to look at it, though. 5 to 8. Fuck, I meant to say 5 to 8.
Fine.
Okay. This is what we're doing for now. We'll do one later, don't worry. Hearing, please like, favorite, share,